at my phone then.
Hi everyone, I'm Henry from Cornwall Film Festival, and thank you for joining us this evening for the next of our live industry interviews. Today I'm joined by marine coordinator and production stills photographer Thom Axon. But before we meet him, we're just going to give people a chance to find the stream and make sure it is working. Now, if you are watching, do let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment. And if you're enjoying, give us a like or a wave. Now, if you are joining live, don't forget you can also submit your questions for Thom via the comments. And if you're watching recorded, do let us know which is your favorite part of the interview. If you don't have a question, just tag someone who you think is missing out and would really benefit from seeing this video. Now it is time for me to properly introduce tonight's guest. Now we'll get rid of the screen share to start with. Ooh, people are saying they can't hear us. We're live, but they can't hear us. What's going on? Oh, they can now. Oh, I love technology, don't you, Thom?
Gotta love it, yeah.
We do like. Anyway, back to Thom's introduction. Tonight, I am joined by Thom Axon, marine coordinator, production stills photographer, who has worked on such projects as Game of Thrones, Outlander, the Cornish hit Bait, Tim Burton's Dumbo, and another Cornish sensation, Poldark. Please give a big like for Thom Axon.
Thank you very much, Henry.
Hello, Thom. Yes, I think we're over our technological problems there. But let's get straight into it, Thom. How did you become a marine coordinator and production stills photographer?
Well, I guess that's two different paths. But the marine coordination would be, like I assume most marine coordinators, I went to sea, and then it happened. So I went to sea on the kind of ships I went on were old wooden creaky ships that often get used in interesting productions, and as a member of the crew you get roped into being an extra, and then you end up helping, and then you pick up a bit of knowledge, and then you just get more and more useful as you go.
So how many years do you spend at sea?
13, I think, overall. 13, yeah.
Do you see the world, Thom?
I didn't know. I always say I'm well journeyed, but not well travelled. So I saw a lot of the Irish Sea, a lot of the East Coast, a lot of Brittany, a fair bit of the Bay of Biscay and parts of Spain, but not a great deal of the world.
Oh, there's always time. There's always more time. So how did you get into the production stills photography route then? A bit different.
Yeah, completely different. So while I was working on a boat called Eva St. Maur's for classic sailing, I inherited my granddad's old film camera, old Bronica medium format camera, and little did I know it was actually broken. So I didn't know how to use it other than to wind it on and click a button. But I really loved the shots I was taking, and then I won a competition to do a course in photography online. And to expedite the course, I picked up a digital camera for next to nothing, and then one of the modules I had to do headshots, and I had to do other things, and then I got into it and started building my portfolio until people started asking me to take photos of various things, including stills photography on bait, which is where I really started it.
Cool. Yeah, we're going to talk a bit about bait as we move on. But before we do, what exactly does a marine coordinator do? I'm guessing we know it's something to do with boats and the sea.
And coordination.
And coordination, but put it into terms we can understand.
So I generally tell directors what they're asking me is physically impossible by the laws of nature, but then help them to get the best out of the situations that might be presented. Often starting with a weather forecast and working backwards. Weather forecast and a shot list, and you put those two things together. They tell us exactly the shots that they want to get, and then we can work out exactly how to make the shots taken into account. I guess the trickiness of being at sea and the inherent problems that can come with being on a ship. So is everything you're actually at sea the whole time? It depends on the production. So for Outlander, we were at sea for the whole time. Game of Thrones, that was all in a set, and the ship wasn't even real, but they wanted elements of it to look real. So yeah, it all depends. But when we're on board the ship is when, I guess it's when it's really interesting, because we get to use our knowledge of ships and the sea, and they use their knowledge of cinematography, and we can combine the two.
So how much sort of time do you get when you get a project? Do you sort of get literally told on the day, this is what the director wants, or do you get a lot of prep time for those sorts of jobs?
It literally depends. So Outlander, we got a fair bit of time. But when you get there, that's when as well, they might have changed their mind slightly, because they might see the ship and go, oh, brilliant. Okay, well, we're going to do this plan A that we shelved years ago or months ago, and we'll talk about it. So, but generally we get a good bit of notice, and then it changes on the fly. And when I worked for Dumbo, I was literally called about 3 p.m, and then I drove to Cardinham Studios overnight and started work the next day. I didn't realise what the production was until I got there and got the call sheet. So
well, that's a bit unexpected.
It can
so let's talk a bit about these productions then. You said for Outlander, you were at sea the whole time. Not to use the phrase all at sea, but what exactly what were you doing at sea?
Well, so we took the ship. It was my first ever trip on the Phoenix, actually. And it was the year that the tall ships races came to Falmouth. So we passed all of those coming down the Irish Sea as we, on our own, went up to Troon in Scotland, where they wanted to get just a few shots. It was mainly of them getting on the ship and taking the ship. I don't want to give any spoilers. But
okay. We got a spoiler alert. So if you got spoilers, just cover your ears, turn the sound off for a moment. But no. Come on. Okay, Tom, we've done the covering. Go for it. Tell us all.
Okay, well, it wasn't that much. It's just they leave a port in Britain and they end up in France for the start of series 2, which was great for them because they got their opening shot for the second series in one hit. But there was a lot of scenes at sea, a lot of dialogue. So that involved us putting the sun in the right place for them and then just drifting around and then sort of resetting and that sort of thing. So there wasn't full on sailing. That usually happens when they need the filler shots, the establishing shots of the ship heading out to sea, and then we'll make the ship look as dynamic as possible while they fly a helicopter. Well, it was a helicopter back then, it'd probably be a drone now.
Ooh. So are these ships actually under sail?
Yeah, again, it depends. So sometimes there might not be enough wind, or there might be too much wind that you can't get it under sail for the shot they want. I think Outlander were very lucky. We managed to get most of the cloth up and sail. But I did a TV production with Tom Cunliffe on the Matthew, and there was no wind, but so we dropped the sails and then went hard astern on the engines to fill them, and then told them where not to film from, so you couldn't tell that actually we were under motor.
So there's quite a lot of sort of trickery that goes on then behind the scenes to make it all work.
Yeah.
And you were saying then that Outlander, at sea, it's all practical.
Yeah.
What about Game of Thrones? Was Game of Thrones all practical as well?
Yeah, practical in the sense of sort of Hollywood. So they needed. I was asked to join Aquafilms, who are incredible marine coordination company. They're generally on a lot of the big productions, and my friend Brendan was short a crew member, and he asked me to go along. So I took that job, and because he knew that I had a square rig experience and traditional boat experience, but the boat was a set, and the masts themselves were just about, 20 feet high, and everything above that was ladder beams. So then it was up to us to work out how to rig a traditional sail onto a studio. So we worked that out, and it was a very specific shot they wanted, which they never actually used. So it was a 12-hour setup for that shot, and then it was all nighttime, and then a 12-hour standby for the job to happen. And I think we were called on the set once to move a rope.
So like so many things in filmmaking, there can be a lot of sitting around them whilst you're waiting. Yeah,
incredibly. So I think that's why I prefer it on the ship. It's because when you're waiting, you're also a crew member of a ship, so you get to do something.
I can say, when you're on the ship and you've got a whole film crew, most people watching probably know that the captain is iconically, in charge of the ship. How does it work on filming?
It depends on the filming. So if there is a captain as a character, then you can have you'll cheat it so you only see one half of the wheel. And most of the times I've ever been at sea, in a marine coordination capacity, I've had the incredible fortune of sailing with a guy called Eric Henry, who's part man, part ocean. So he'll, I've seen him sort of driving a ship with his feet in order to stay out the shot. But we'll be dressed up as extras. So if we have to dash in there, we can take over. But yeah, Eric's become quite attuned to just allowing people to look like they're in charge while absolutely maintaining the charge of the ship.
So big shout out to Eric then if he's watching today. Hopefully he is, so you can ask Thom some questions. If you do have any questions, or if maybe you're a sailor and want to ask Thom some very specific questions and you're watching, do put them in the comments and we'll try and ask him and see if we can catch him out in any way. Sorry, Thom. So we talked about...
Yeah, Eric will be good at that.
Yeah, so we'll see if he's watching. So Outlander at sea, GOT studio. What about Poldark then, that iconic Cornish series?
My involvement was later on. So I just left the Phoenix as they rolled in for the first series. So you can have a lot of my friends appear in the first series. And I got, I think the fourth or fifth series, in which they came to Charlestown. And so we would rig up the ship for them to get on, get off, and again, smoke and mirrors. So we'd hide all of the things that are modern that we need to have on the ship. And then we would sort of accentuate areas of the ship to look bigger than they are or be more important than they are. And a lot of times the director will say, I want them to go down there. And it's like, well, they traditionally wouldn't have done. And that's the other side of it. You have to tell people that wouldn't have happened, but also be willing to accept that people want it to happen. So you then have to work out a way of making that happen for them in a way that fits their narrative, but also doesn't make you as a marine coordinator and a sailor look stupid. And that's quite important, really.
Yeah, because you're considering how it all turns out. But that's a great part. I suppose most things involving boats tend to be either fantastical or period drama. So are there things that have changed over time in sailing and some things that have stayed completely the same?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So have some things in sailing stayed completely the same over the years, or has lots of things changed?
No, entirely. I'm very lucky. The ships I've been on, we're in a modern era, but I mean, a ship like the Phoenix is a replica of an 18th century brig. You've been on board, so you can see that everything that's in place there, the blocks, the pulleys, to move all of those lines and make the ship work. It looks amazing and it looks so fantastical that you think that it doesn't work, but actually you're leaning on history and tradition that's so old, but it's still completely relevant. The most modern sailing boat leans on these things that were made back then. So there are things even on modern ships that haven't changed in hundreds, if not thousands of years in some cases.
Okay, that's great. So I suppose a lot of people who do a lot of sailing will know those things that have changed and what haven't. Before we move on to, I suppose, one of the hits of the moment, which is bait, I'm guessing safety is quite an important part of your job, helping provide and make sure everything's been considered, both in the harbour and at sea.
Entirely, yeah.
What sort of safeguarding do you have to put in place to make that work?
It all depends on the shot. So that's where it does help to know what you're stepping into or what you're inviting to your ship or to your harbour or your quayside. So the lovely words, risk assessment, very important to have those. And it's generally it's managing people. And it is that classic thing of just don't be an arse. Just take your time. If you're not familiar with ships, just treat it, just be tentative. If you are familiar with ships, that's when generally people are more dangerous because they think they know everything. And it's like, but it's generally just giving people enough of a talking to before you go on that they understand, but not so much that they're in fear of being able to move freely as creators, as actors, as directors, producers on board the deck as well. And there's always someone spotting them. The longer you do this for, the more you will see something that's about to happen. But it's ideally you stop that from happening way before it happens.
No, definitely. I mean, I remember being on board the Phoenix, which you of course worked with when she was in Charlestown for Frontier, which is on Netflix.
Yeah.
We were red-coated soldiers, and I think we got on and off her about 20 times as you had to turn around in such a tiny space, and the skill to which taking around was just crazy.
Yeah.
It's just like quite amazing space to do. But then, okay, let's talk about one of the more modern pieces you've worked on, I suppose. And the BAFTA award-winning Bait.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved in Bait?
I got involved because at the time I was helping Shane, my boss Shane, who owned Charlestown Harbour. We were approached by Early Day Films, Lynn and Kate, who wanted to use the harbour. Not necessarily that harbour, I think Mark Jenkins, he'd filmed something, I think in Malsall previously, and they did a great job, but they found that it was not having control of the harbour was restrictive. The beautiful thing about Charlestown Harbour is if you own the harbour, you own the harbour, so you can block it off and dress it up as you like for productions, and that was really appealing to them. And I got involved early on because they, like most people, they turn up and say, hi, we've got no money, but we'd like to shoot in your harbour. And it's like, okay, well, let's see what we can do. And when we were talking to them, it's just, I think their passion shone through. And Shane, he could have easily just said, it's not worth our while. But we managed to arrange it. So me and another guy called Matt Chapman, who's harbour master, one of the harbour masters in Charlestown now, we put a lot into that film. And a lot of out of hours, we worked for free on that film a lot, and we really gave it our all because we liked them and we loved the film, and we thought it was fascinating. Like some dude from way out west turns up with a wind-up camera, you're going to pay attention, So, and how they were doing things, they were real indie moguls. So instead of expensive booms and gear, they turn up with a pickup. Like I think the opening shot of Bait, I don't want to give away any of how it was done, but this one I just loved, is that Mark with his tripod on the back of a pickup while they freewheeled down a slight incline in Charlestown, and you've got that really iconic shot of Ed Rowe walking. And so they turned up with this sort of real attitude that I could get on board with, and me and Matt worked really hard to make sure they got what they wanted, really.
Because there's some sailing, I guess, in Bait itself. Is that what you call modern boats going out, sailing still, or what's it called?
Yeah, sailing. Sailing's fine, or motoring, or just boating. I think if people know what you're on about, it's not wrong. Sometimes, yeah. And
do you have to put different things in place then when working with those older boats and newer boats? Was it all for you? Was it organising it wise the same?
It's not necessarily old and new. It's very much individual boats. So we can't know every ship or boat or vessel that we're going to work with. So we have to. Usually, I've been on ships and boats for long enough, and the sea for long enough, that you can get. There are so many different types of craft, and then after that, they each have their niches, their nuances. So it's just about learning that, and also chatting with the skipper. And there's one scene in that film, I'm definitely not going to put any spoilers in for Bait, but it was it could have been really dangerous. So we had to use the whole harbour and like really long lines, and have, for this one shot, everyone just completely sharp and on it. And it's times like that, as a marine coordinator, you need to respect Mark Jenkins' artistic vision, but you also need to tell him that the overall important thing here is safety, and I will ruin your film to keep someone safe.
No, makes sense. We've been told, by the way, in the comments from Jess that it's motoring.
I read that. That is true if the motor's on. So
there you go. It's amazing what I learn from these interviews, really. I do learn all these technical terms. It's quite fun for me, but then I forget them all. It's like be possibly useless at a pub quiz.
Yeah, maybe. Unless that very specific question.
Specific question. Yeah. Okay, Tom. So if someone wants to become a marine coordinator or work, I guess, with ships, let's say, in film, is there any advice you could give them as to how to get into it?
Yeah, go to sea, man. Just pick up your boots and get on a ship.
Run away to sea.
Run away to sea and learn. I mean, you can't really... I mean, you can always have everyone's opinion is always valid in anything, but the more time you spend doing that thing, the more your opinion is valid, because it's based on mistakes. Let's be frank. Like, you've made enough mistakes or you've made enough near misses, you know what definitely can't work. So anyone willing to be a marine coordinator, I would recommend they put some sea time under them first, but then on the journey, they'll get sucked into that.
No, definitely, it sounds good. So basically, we encourage people to run away to sea if they like to. On the flip side of that, then, let's talk about filmmakers. If filmmakers want to work with boats or ships or in harbours around the sea, big boats, small boats, are there any sort of tips you could give to a filmmaker or photographers? Major things you've seen that have gone wrong or errors they've made to make their lives easier, particularly when they have no budget.
Yeah, listen to the, if you've got a ship in mind or a boat in mind, have something in mind and be realistic about it. If you've got no budget, think, I want the Phoenix, but I might have to do with no ship at all. But there might be someone out there who's got a bunch of ropes and a big pole that they know of that they could cheat it. I think it's just going with an open mind and expect that it can go anywhere. And the boat community, the ship community, generally is really, really quite welcoming. And I think if you're willing to listen and step back, especially if you don't understand the world, if you're willing to listen and then offer help based on what you've learned and not step too far forwards until you're ready, like anything, I guess, just be willing to help, but more importantly, willing to listen. The actors that I've worked with on ship that I've either asked back to sail or have asked back to help out again have been those that have just absolutely listened to what they need to do and then shown an interest in the right way. So I think it's just ask questions, take an interest, and listen and learn.
No, that makes sense. I think particularly down here in Cornwall, we have a lot of student filmmakers who want to do different things, but people across the world who want to work and add value to their projects. It's important for them to know, listen to people with those experiences and, develop those skills from there. Yeah. So I think then, Tom, it is time for your questions.
That was quick. Okay.
From your adoring fans. Well, there's quite a few of them I got coming. I've got some sort of lined up as well for you. So this is from Matthew. I think Tom's also can see the question, so you might be enjoying this. Hey, cousin, You're a legend. It's a lot of praise for you here. Which famous actor you have met is the most interesting? So which is the most interesting actor you've met?
That's a fine question. It's not, I don't know if I could put it down to one person. I think, I really enjoyed my time with Jason Momoa. I think he just, he was really interesting. He listened to the brief, stood out the way when he wanted to, had no ego about him, and really asked questions and took an interest in what was happening around him. So I think, I don't know if he's the most interesting. He's certainly very interesting, but I'd say Jason Momoa stands out quite highly.
And that was on Frontier, was it?
That was on Frontier, yeah.
Can you tell us what were you doing on Frontier? Because I know that they obviously used the Phoenix for part of it, but for those who don't know, Frontier is a series predominantly set in Canada about the fur trade on Netflix, which I think has been quite popular. And Jason Momoa plays one of the leads in that, so do go check it out. But what were they doing over here?
The thing is, with Charlestown, certainly then, is you got a ship and you got a harbour and you got control of it. So it made sense to be able to come over to a place. And also they'd shot here for the first season and they really enjoyed the catering staff that they picked up from the wreckers who were based out in Charlestown and the hotel. So they just liked it and it felt safe and it felt good. And I think a little bit like the sea that John Vacher, the director, he turned up and he just always felt like it was going to be a lucky shoot. So I think that's one thing. And the other thing is, he could book a tall ship and a harbour without worrying about the logistics of those two things combining. So that was, I think, the main reason they came over, and the fact that obviously the crew of the Phoenix at the time was awesome. So why wouldn't you want to use them?
Oh, there you go. No, makes sense. So what is the best and worst part of filming with a ship?
The best bit, I don't know really. The best bit is probably going to the job where it's just a professional crew. It's one of the very rarely do you get to sail on old ships and only have a professional crew. Usually it's very charter based or sail training based, and they're excellent things to do in their own right. But just going somewhere with a paid crew is just amazing because everyone's there to do that job. No one can feign out of it. There's very specific job roles for very specific people, and it can be a lot of fun. But inherently going to sea can just be awful. It can be, you can have the worst time of your life at sea as much as you can have the best. And then probably the most annoying thing can then be when you go and get to the job. And if the production, if they're stressed and hassled and they start on a bad foot, I think it's that change from being so free as much as you're allowed to be on a ship, apart from the inherent restrictions of the watch system and the conditions, then going over to someone else's timetable can also always be a bit annoying. But it doesn't take long to shift that perception and start creating art and doing something beautiful with that collaboration in mind, which is always very important.
Do you ever get to go out in the choppy weather then for filming?
Well, yeah, sometimes, but you'd never choose to go out in dangerous weather. If they wanted to do choppy weather, there's ways you can cheat it to look choppier, but there's a level of, depending on the ship or the boat, you will tell the director, we're not doing that, but you will always find another way or another day to do it.
No, that makes sense. I mean, you don't put anyone's safety at risk, do you really? Okay, here's the next one. Are there any films you've watched and wished you'd been a part of?
Are there any films I've watched and wished I'd been a part of?
I guess this relates to either maybe your stills work or to the sailing world.
Oh, so many. Nothing to do with ships, but Peaky Blinders. I just love the cinematography of that as a series, so I'd love to.
There's some narrow boats you could get on there.
Yeah, some narrow boats. Yeah, not really my strong point, but I mean, I think more than anything, I'd like to get involved with that on a stills level. Just I really love how they put those things together. And films, there's too many to choose from. Sorry, I can't really pick one at the moment. Those the other series, The Terror. I really wish I'd been asked to be involved with that somehow. That was amazing. No,
that makes sense. I mean, there's always so much content out there, especially at the moment, that it's like, how do you choose what you want to get involved with?
Yeah.
Have you got any advice then for someone who wants to become a stills photographer, and any do's and don'ts on set, particularly for any students watching?
Just completely stay out of the way. Just if you can have time, talk to whoever's vision it is. Again, I was lucky with on Bates, the producers and the director. They were all around, but when there's a moment where you've got to stop bugging them. So you need to know if you can just hawkeye it from a distance and see how, usually there's a run through in the blocking, so you can stand back and see what's going to happen. Still take photos because you could get something you'll miss on the second one round. Just absolutely stay out of the way. Don't use a flash if you can help it, because that wouldn't go well if you ruin someone's light, especially when on film. Yeah, just stay out of the way and find out which way to go, and also see what their narrative's about. If you can't match your images to their narrative, then you may as well just be taking photos for someone else.
No, I think it's great advice for people to that aspect, because often stills are so important to help sell the film and show behind the scenes. So, it's a vital job. Okay, one from Jess. How do you approach filming in close quarters, such as below decks? Do you give any advice on that?
Again, depends on the shot. If you're a production company, choose a ship that's good to do that. Like on Phoenix, there are certain parts of the ship you can do it, but I think it's just about getting creative, getting good lighting down there, a good lens with a wide aperture, and again, find out what shot they want, and if it's realistic, go with it, and if it's not, try and get the next best thing for them.
Do you ever have to put some of the talent or actors through like a miniature boot camp on set to make sure that they're holding the rope right? Or
we will always look out for that, and we will say, especially in the digital age, it's not so important because you're not wasting film. But if someone's doing something that would be dangerous or silly or idiotic, we will have to stop it from a safety reason. But also, you might want a word in the director's ear and say, well, that was a great take, but you wouldn't put your foot there because he's the first mate in this narrative and he should know better. But then that's just me being a rivet counter, but that's why we're there as well, to make it sort of accurate.
No, that makes sense. I mean, that's part of your job. It's like when we spoke to Paul, the military advisor, he had to go similar thing of, would people walk like that? How would they do it? They're portraying a character ultimately. Yeah. And you have to take a balance between realism and not. So Fleur asks, hello, Fleur, do you have any tourists trying to get on board the ships whilst filming?
Not so much tourists. It depends on what you're filming. But we often, depending on the production, there is a problem with sort of media. People with long lenses trying to get a shot, they've got really no entitlement to get. And that's how not to do a stills photography. Like to get that one hit, big paycheck to get a shot of Aidan Turner's ass. Like, don't be that person. Don't be that photographer. And if you are that photographer, quit.
Move on. Move on.
Move on.
People blag their way past security on set, which I'm sure does happen. Ooh.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I don't know if you can tell us this one or not, Tom, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Go for it.
Yeah, I know. Have you ever worked with someone who's been very seasick on the ship?
Yeah. Loads of people. Most productions, there's been someone who's just can't cut it. Like, yeah.
Is that just something that, I mean, you can't tell us any names then?
But what that could potentially ruin a lot of illusions for a lot of people, couldn't it? Like, so I won't name names here, but yeah, a lot of people who you'd think,
it does happen. People do get seasick on productions, so that makes perfect sense, though.
This must be difficult because if they've got to look at something like as a crew member, you can just do what you want, really. But sometimes you've got to pretend there's someone there you're speaking to and the ship's doing that. It can be really difficult. Some people just step on and then they're gone. So, but yeah, a lot of people get seasick, but I'm not telling you who. Sorry.
Well, it was worth asking, wasn't it, really? That's the thing with it. It's always worth asking questions. Right, Tom, what is your dream project to work on, either as a stills photographer, excluding Peaky Blinders, or as a marine coordinator? It could be anything, any genre, any style. What would it be?
Dream project. I'd be quite happy with sort of oceanic genre. There's a production in the works coming up based around the voyage and the relationship between Darwin and the captain of the Beagle. And I would love to be involved with that in one way or another, because of the epic journey and the amazing tale. That sort of thing. I'd quite like high budget and yeah.
Well, you never know who's watching these things, Tom. You know, we ask people what they want to do, and you never know who could be watching this and go, "Ooh,
yeah." I just love the process. I really love the process of collaboration, especially in the creative arts. And if I can, even on set when all you end up doing is sort of watching, because your bit isn't ready yet, I can soak that in. I really do enjoy it. So I like big productions because you see this world that is just unfathomable, and I like small productions because you get to mess in a bit. Like on Bait, 1 minute you're doing what you're employed to do, and the next minute you're getting around to coffees.
Yeah, no, sounds good. I mean, coffee is always important, as we know. Any film set does tend to run on coffee.
Yeah, I'm not sure I answered that too much, but I think a big budget production with maritime involved. If they're doing a second series of Taboo as well, I'd love to get involved with that.
Well, you never know. I mean, anyone could be watching these. We've talked about Taboo a few times, actually. I think Paul again was involved in that one. What's been the most challenging project you've had?
Technically, it's funny because usually production companies come up and say, we don't know how to do this, so it's over to you. This is what we want, and you can use what you know to help them get what they need. So, but weather-wise, there was one job out. This was for Dan Snow, I think, this series we were doing on the Matthew, and the weather was awful, and they just had to get this one shot that lasted about 5 minutes, and it took 3 days to get. So that was probably one of the most annoying that stands out, because it was such an easy shot, and if I'm honest, they could have done it in a studio with someone with a hose pipe for what they needed, but they thought that they'd like to have they only booked a day for the Matthew, but they ended up booking 5 because it took 2 days to get there and back and 3 days to just hide. So yeah, it's tricky.
Well, I think it's all these different challenges and stuff. Well, Fleur's saying the Beagle did put into Falmouth, so you may have a local link to put into there.
Yeah.
What's the longest time you spent at sea for filming?
Personally, not that long. But Eric and the crew at the time who did in the heart of the sea. I mean, they had to take the ship to the Canaries, spend months there and sail back. But unfortunately, that wasn't me who did that job. I would have loved to have done that job. But I'd say The longest part generally of a job at sea is the journey to where you need to be. So I'd probably say a month and a half was my longest stint on a job, but it's not like that's a month and a half stuck at sea, unfortunately.
Okay. Do you... Ooh, I sound hear myself from somewhere. My sound's come on. So it was very disconcerting. I don't know, I can hear myself. So Tom, when you're doing your stills,
yeah,
is there a moment where you look at a shot and go, that's it?
yeah. Well, that's happened 1 or 2 times, and one of them was for bait, when it's Ed Rowe smoking his cigarette, dressed as Martin in the film, and I took that shot. It was just before he started filming. I think that was a moment where he was just sort of getting his head in the moment. I thought, I don't want to be in the way, so I'm going to get out of the way. But while I'm getting out of the way, I'm going to take a shot. And I looked at him and thought, oh, yeah, that'll do. That'll do very nicely.
And of course, that shot's used quite a lot now, isn't it? I think for bait.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So there you go, people. If you do take that one shot, it can be used across the board for projects.
Yeah.
Which I think is great. Right, we're coming towards the end, Tom. I know time flies, isn't it? It's quite amazing how quickly things go.
Yeah.
Just see if we've got another question here for you. I think you're okay, actually. I think people have been quite nice to you this evening. Oh, we lost you? No, you're still there.
Yeah, not bad. Thank you.
It's quite good. Yeah,
still here.
No, almost. You're almost done. You're almost done. But I know you're, as well as being a marine coordinator and a production stills photographer, you've recently started something else, Arthur's Club. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that quickly to everyone watching.
Oh, but very quickly, Arthur's Club is a YouTube channel that we're trying to do really creative things with stories, known stories. So we've got Dear Zoo at the moment. That next one is going to be The Tiger Who Came to Tea. And we're trying to push ourselves, me as a videographer, which is an area I'd like to get into. My partner, who is an actor, is also, we're learning Makaton to be able to communicate with our child, with our baby, who's called Arthur. And this is for everyone, every single person that also thinks that they might want something cool to look at and stories to go with, so they can learn a bit of Makaton, enjoy a nice story at the very least.
Oh, that sounds great. And I definitely think you can find that. So that's on YouTube, yeah?
Yeah, we don't have enough subscribers to have a nice, simple youtube.com/Arthur's Club. It's loads of numbers and letters, but you can just type in the search bar Arthur's Club Makaton, and it should come up.
Marvelous. Well, if everyone goes checks that out, that I think is going to be great. So Tom,
give a nod to Feast at this point, who helped with a little kickstart sort of COVID funds that just to get things rolling. So big thank you to Feast and the Arts Council and Cornwall Council for helping us with that.
Nice. Well, I'm sure hopefully everyone will go check that out. But Tom, thank you so much for your time. And thank you everyone for watching. It's been really interesting to find out more about boats and stills photography, definitely. I think they're one of those things that we all see on screen, but have no real knowledge of how it all works.
Yeah, I guess I see them on screen and I'm shouting at how it's wrong. But yeah, it's been a real pleasure to speak to you, Henry. I've been loving this series, especially the one with Tim Palmer. But it's been a real honor to be a part of this. So thank you very much. No,
thank you. Well, before we go, I've got a few things to say. So this weekend in Falmouth, where we're based, should have been the International Sea Shanty Festival, which raises money annually for the RNLI. And they've got a live digital sea shanty on, I believe it's tomorrow night. Put a link in the bio. So if you want to go check that out and get some sea shanties to follow on from this theme, that would be great. And Sally, thank you so much for your help today. She's been helping with the social media, and she's just put a link up to Arthur's Club on the comments as well. So thank you for that. So Tom, thank you again. I think the only other things, if you haven't seen the rest of the series, do please go check them out on the Cornwall Film Festival Facebook page under the videos tab. We've got a couple more coming up. Next week, I am joined by casting director who has done Downton Abbey movie, Sanditon, The Musketeers, Merlin, and many more. And that is on Wednesday, the 17th at 6 p.m. So, Tom, is there anything else you'd like to say to everyone watching before we go?
Yes, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. And yeah, just Thanks for your interest, and the fact that you even turned up amazes me. And whether you're making films or sailing boats or just interested, it's really great that you turned up. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and do let us know what you're up to. If you do start doing anything with boats, get in touch and let us know how these interviews impact you and your work. Right. So we share that. We turn you off, Tom. Goodbye, Tom. Turn your video off. Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely rest of your week. And we shall see you all soon.